Hey, how's it going? This is Melinda and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be talking to you about Mobile Fidelity, giving an update on a video I made back in July. Do you all remember back in July when the whole vinyl world went mad because we found out that Mobile Fidelity was actually using digital sourcing when they were putting out some of their titles. We had assumed all along that there was a pure analog chain with every single record. We found out that there's a DSD file, a very sophisticated digital sourcing being used, and we just didn't know it, so we were all shocked. It was a big deal. And back then in July, I made a video and I showed my top 3 highest valued one-steps as well as my top 10 highest valued Mobile Fidelity records. I posed the question, are these records going to climb in value or are they going to fall in value? And I have a clear answer to that. So this is all inspired too by the new release that's coming out, and the pressure is on with Mobile Fidelity for the Michael Jackson Thriller One Step. I'll admit, this is a record I have been looking forward to. It's a sentimental record. I know that record like the back of my hand. It came out at a very important time in my life, and it means a lot to me. And I've always been a big fan of Mobile Fidelity. And I fall along the lines of, well, that I thought, when I thought the records were analog, I thought they sounded great. And you know what? They still sound great, even though they're digital. Everybody has a different opinion, though, and I respect each and every one of you for the stand you take. So if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe, hit the like button. Let's get started. Let's show these 3 one-steps, and I'm going to show you and talk to you about how much they were worth back in July and how much they're selling for now. And there is a trend. Okay, so let's get started with Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water, a wonderful one-step. And back in July, a copy of this had sold for $240, and on average, this one step was selling for $290. That was July, and now it's November of 2022. And the last copy of this sold for $205, and the average is $254. So the averages are where I'm really going to focus, because a lot of times what they last sold for depends on the condition, whether something's sealed, opened, VG plus, mint. It just all depends. So let's kind of focus on the averages. And yes, this record has gone down in value, and on the average about $40 or so. So that's interesting to note. And next up is a one step by Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. This is another great release, and it last sold for $195 back in July, and on average sold for $258. And now we fast forward to November, and the last copy sold for $190, and on average is $248. So we're talking a $10 drop off, but it's still showing a trend of these not continuing to climb in value as they get older, but going down in value. And next up, this is the most expensive one step I own. It is Mingus, A Hum by Charles Mingus. This one is a very beloved one step. Sounds great. It's a great record. And back in July, it had sold for $250, and on average was selling for $250. That was pretty much the going rate. And this one is a fluke because it last sold for $400. Now, I'm assuming it was a low number, still sealed copy. So I just kind of throw that one out as a one-time, really expensive record. It now sells on average, though, it went from $250 in July to $218. So again, another drop off. And I kind of expected that with these one steps. These are the most expensive Mobile Fidelity records that you can buy. And I think they were the ones that were most impacted by this revelation that they were using digital sourcing. So now let's move on to my top 10 most valuable records from Mobile Fidelity. And let's start off with the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. This one is a 45 RPM 2LP set that sounds really, really good. This is a mono version of it. And back in July, it sold for $250 and on average was selling for $175. It last sold for $175, so we're sticking with the average here. But the average now went from $175 in July to now $166. So it last sold for $175 here in November, but the average has actually gone down to $166. Again, not a major drop, but if you have a big Mobile Fidelity collection, you see the slide. Next up, and this is one that I should say this. When I decided to make this video back in July, I decided to include some of the Mobile Fidelity records that we know are pure analog. They came out in the 80s. And I just wanted to see in whole whether the Mobile Fidelity brand was going to suffer or not suffer at all and maybe even go up in value. So I decided to include some of these 80s records that we know for sure are analog sourced. And one of them is Sgt. Pepper by the Beatles. And this one had last sold for $250 back in July and on average was selling for $170. Well, something weird happened again with this one, and the last copy of this here November sold for $432.99. But on average, it now sells for $165. So it's a $5 drop off, and I believe it's probably a lot more. Just someone overpaid over $400 for this record. So again, another drop off, even for those older titles. Here's Mobile Fidelity's Eat a Peach by the Allman Brothers, a killer record. Now, I have the 2018 version of it. There is an older version with the blue label that says original master recording. That one was probably from around the 80s. This one is the 2018 version. And Eat a Peach back in July sold for $250 and on average was selling for $175. And this month, the last copy sold for $169.99. And so on average is now a $170 record. So it's, again, not going up. It's going down a little bit. Not major drop-offs, but it's now a $5. It's worth $5 less on average than it did in July. Here's another cool one, Bob Dylan's Desire. Love this. This is 2LP, 45 RPM. Great sounding. I say this is the definitive version, unless you have the super vinyl version. This one's not the super vinyl version. But it sold in July for $250 and on average was selling for $189. And now this, again, this copy sold for $170 and on average is now selling for $185. So a few dollars drop off. Again, not a climb, but a drop off. This one, again, is from the 80s. It's the Beatles, Rubber Soul. And I think a lot of times these records by the Beatles are going to hang on to their value because they're the Beatles. People like to collect all versions of the Beatles records. So these of all records will probably continue to retain value. Plus, they're pure analog records, we know for sure as well. And this one back in July sold for $329. So whoever you are, that was a lot of money. And on average was selling for $184. And this one last sold for $146.67 and now is selling for $178. So $6 less than the average it was in July. Here is Ziggy Stardust. This is by David Bowie. I should say this is The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Fantastic record. And this is a pure analog version of it back from the 80s. And it last sold in July for $245 and on average was selling for $215. And this one last sold here in November of 2022 for $145 and on average is now selling for $200. So a $15 drop off on a classic that is analog. You know, it says a little bit about whether Mobile Fidelity's name brand has taken a hit. I wouldn't say so far it's been major, but it is a hit. Now we'll go ahead to Let's Dance by David Bowie, another really cool record. This one sounds great. And it sold back in July for $300 and on average was selling for $211. And it last sold here in November for $230 and now is on average selling for $200. So an $11 drop off. This is one we now know is for sure digitally sourced. It is Miles Davis in a Silent Way. Killer record. I think this one is the 33 RPM single record. But again, this is what I think is probably a definitive copy to own. It's killer. And it last sold in July for $285 and on average was selling for $225. It last sold for $140 and now on average is selling for $207. So a little bit of a drop off there. Still a killer record. I say this particular record is going to keep its value for the most part because it just sounds so good. Here is 1984's Hotel California by the Eagles. There is going to be a digitally sourced one step of this coming out really soon. I'm very eager to hear it. And this 1984 copy back in July sold for $800. Another fluke, so kind of throw that one out. It's price sealed. Maybe it was autographed. Who knows? But it was on average selling for $250. And here in November of 2022, it is $225 is what the last copy sold for as I've made this video. And on average is selling for $250. So the average of this hasn't changed. It's kind of rare, so I doubt there's been a ton of transactions where this one has actually sold since then. So, and this is from Discogs. This isn't giving a perfect, clear picture of what's going on, but a lot of record stores look to Discogs when it comes to pricing their audiophile records or just records in general. So I say Discogs kind of leads the way with pricing and gives us a little snapshot of what's going on. Here is the final one I'm going to be showing, the Beatles Revolver. And this one had last sold in July for $225 and on average was selling $235. No, I take that back. I forgot to mention how much the average was on this one back in July. The last copy of this here in November sold for $133.33, and the average is now $235. So I don't know why I didn't mention that in the last video. I apologize, but the average for this one is $235. So I'd say overall, these records have dropped in value where a lot of records continue to climb. These have kind of paused. And we have to ask the bigger question, though. Is this Mobile Fidelity? Is it because of the controversy? Or is it because of the economy? Is it because of inflation and all of things going on? Are people having to just do without these big splurges now? And I'd say that might have a lot more to do with it than the Mobile Fidelity controversy. I'd say a lot of people have put that behind us and we've made our decision. Are we going to continue to buy Mobile Fidelity records or are we not? And I say a lot of it hinges on Thriller and all of the upcoming records that are going to be coming that I'm very excited about, and you probably are too. And now I want to discuss a little bit about, I got my Music Direct catalog, and I want to discuss some of the exciting upcoming releases. And a lot of times when they talk or give us a sneak peek, we're talking years down the road. For some of these, it's so crazy. I kind of like what Chad Kassem's doing with Analog Productions. He announces it when he's already got something in stock and ready to ship out. I kind of like that. It adds to the excitement of it. But last year they announced that they are putting out one steps of all of the Van Halen records. They've been putting out records by the Eagles. They still need to put out Hotel California and The Long Run. They also have announced some really cool Miles Davis records like Bitches Brew and Sketches in Spain. And so there's going to be some really cool titles. And also, I want to talk to you about some of them they've announced that are probably not going to see the light of day till 2023. I don't know. Or maybe 2024 for that matter. I think we're getting our Van Halens in 2023. I think we're going to finish up the Eagles. I think the Miles Davis releases are coming out in 2023. Maybe some of these. Let's talk first. Bruce Springsteen will be coming out. Now, these two titles by Bruce Springsteen are Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey, The Wild, The Innocent, and The E Street Shuffle. Those titles don't really excite me to go out and buy a one step. Maybe they're going to be, I don't know, ultra discs. I don't know if that really excites me a lot. I'd like to see Darkness on the Edge of Town, Born in the USA, and I don't even necessarily need one steps. 45 RPMs would be sufficient. But you know what? Bruce Springsteen is a great way to go. So I'm really pleased that they're going in that direction, and maybe they'll do more in the future. The River, a box set of The River would be fantastic. So they're also, now we've already had El Dorado by ELO. Now we're going to be also, they're announcing that a 33 RPM 2 LP box set of Out of the Blue will be coming out. So that is another exciting release. It will depend on what all I'm buying at that time, as whether I'm interested in that. We'll just see. This is something else that's very exciting. Joni Mitchell, and they're putting out a lot of her titles. It looks like they're going to be one steps by the picture. Definitely, I would love to have Blue. A one step of Blue would be fantastic. I'm also a big fan of For the Roses. I love that one. There's some really great ones, and I don't think I would be getting every single Joni Mitchell record, but I applaud that they're doing those. There's also going to be Crosby, Stills, and Nash, one step. James Taylor, Greatest Hits, one step. Paul Simon's There Goes Rhythm. Elvis Presley from Elvis in Memphis is going to be on one step. The Alan Parsons Project, I, Robot is finally going to be a one step. There's going to be some Run DMC. We already had the... these are going to be 45 RPM records. We already had Raising Hell, which is really good. There's going to be a couple other Run DMC records. I've already got the one I want. I'm not really interested in the others. This is the real shocker for me of what they announced. Whitney. And this is going to be an unusual, says 180 gram, 33 RPM super vinyl LP. I didn't see that coming. I have an original of that. I'm probably going to stick with the original. That record doesn't really excite me. But I like the direction they're going. I think they're making everybody happy. There's something for everyone. And if they continue to make these records sound really, really great, my hope is that Mobile Fidelity, people will decide, you know what, they're doing these sophisticated digitally sourced records that sound amazing. So maybe we can overlook the fact that they're not analog and that they're putting out these incredible titles that maybe wouldn't be able to be done had they not changed how they were doing things. So I'm pretty excited. There's a lot to look forward to. There's also a Warren Zevon record that's going to be coming out that's going to be incredible. Excitable Boy. Let me know what you're happy about. Let me know how you feel about Mobile Fidelity. Now that all of this has been going on for quite a while, I'd be really curious to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.